Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with This Week in Cannabis News from December 13th to the 19th. So before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learn something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And then, of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos. And there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you're ready. But we're going to start with this fresh news from Marijuana Moment, as Malta has officially legalized cannabis, with President's signature becoming the first in Europe to end cannabis prohibition. So this is a big first, and hopefully there will be more countries to follow in the coming years. So just to share, just days after Malta's president approved a bill to legalize cannabis, President George Vella signed the legislation into law on Saturday. This makes Malta the first European country to enact the reform. So under the legislation sponsored by MP Owen Benici, adults 18 and older will be allowed to possess up to 7 grams of cannabis and cultivate as many as 4 plants for personal use. Up to 50 grams of homegrown cannabis can be stored at home. While there won't be a commercial market per se, so it seems like there's no adult use, which I completely do not understand, but it's a different approach. Non-profit cooperatives will be able to cultivate cannabis and distribute to its members. And so how that'll work, apparently cannabis clubs that are authorized under the law can have as many as 500 members and will be limited to distributing 7 grams per day to each member, with the maximum of 50 grams per month. They can also distribute up to 20 cannabis seeds per month each month. So it's an interesting approach. We'll see how this unfolds, but I definitely think, long term, just launching an adult use market is definitely the best way to go about this. But regardless, good news out of Malta. So great job. On to this one from Marijuana Moment, as Congressional Memo touts cannabis momentum in 2021 and lays out 2022 reform priorities. So with several new states having legalized cannabis in 2021, in addition to some modest congressional developments, reform advocates put some wins on the board this year, but now a Congressional Memo is laying out priorities to build upon those successes for 2022. And so Congressional Cannabis Caucus co-chairs Rep. Earl Blumenauer and Barbara Lee are the authors of the memo, which was shared exclusively with Marijuana Moment ahead of its release, highlighting momentum that has developed behind cannabis reform in the House this year. It also notes that the Senate still has a lot of work to do. So I think the stage is set for federal legalization to happen next year. Blumenauer said during a briefing with reporters on Thursday, "We have Senate leadership. They're dealing with how to assemble a package. They all want comprehensive reform, and they have made that clear. Once we get that alignment and can move it in the Senate, I think things can happen very quickly." And while they did make the campaign promise that they would decriminalize cannabis and deschedule, that's really what we're holding out for. So while lawmakers, advocates, and stakeholders put in significant work to achieve these incremental successes, the memo emphasizes that the work isn't over, obviously, because they actually haven't done anything at the federal level yet. And so it specifically lists 5 priorities for cannabis reform next year. At the top of the list, descheduling cannabis. This would be great, and I hope that they do prioritize this, because this doesn't necessarily need SAFE. This solves most of the issues in one stroke. While legalizing must be coupled with equity, they said that means enacting policies that provide relief to those caught up in the drug war. Well, the sooner you can deschedule, the sooner every social equity applicant gets equal access to low-cost capital, much like any other business in the U.S. While it's also imperative that Biden administration utilize their power available to the executive to pardon and commute sentences for individuals with cannabis-related offenses, while Congress continues to work to enact comprehensive sentencing reform, the memo states. And then lastly, another priority, promoting cannabis research. So all of this is in there. Just wanted to share that because it's good that we at least have lawmakers putting the pressure on continuously versus sitting back and becoming silent. So that's positive. And then just wanted to highlight this. This is another article from Marijuana Moment, but we have Rep. Perlmutter, Blumenauer, and Rep. Joyce spoke to Marijuana Moment about the next steps for passing cannabis banking legislation after it got stripped from a defense bill last week. So just to add some of their quotes, but you can grab the link below. But I think the key takeaway is that they still have the courage to put blame where it is due, saying Senator Schumer really weighed in on this. It was one of the last things eliminated from the NDAA, really at the Senate Majority Leader's insistence. Rep. Perlmutter on cannabis banking being defeated at the last minute. Well, it's very clear that this is the last time that we're going to basically avoid the shutdown over cannabis banking without blowing up larger bills. So good to add that they are making Schumer own it, because again, I think it's worth highlighting that regardless of who's in party, if you make a promise to actually, take the next incremental steps, but then you take out the simplest form of SAFE that would really not help the big tier 1 MSOs, but would just get cash off the streets and make the environment safer with less robberies targeting small mom and pop shop and social equity, you can't, blame the other party for what they've said in the past. You can only blame the people in charge, and that is Chuck Schumer. It's all on him. So just wanted to add that. While Politico Pro reported this as pub with Q&A with Rep. Perlmutter, that echoes much of what what Todd Harrison and Brady Cobb were saying in real time, that at least if he pulls it, he's going to have to own it publicly. These pictures that Todd Harrison shared, so thank you, Todd, comes from Politico Pro with this Q&A with Ed Perlmutter. He responds, I was pretty angry, Perlmutter said in a conversation with Politico about a week after the House Rules Committee hearing where he announced he would not keep trying to fight for safe inclusion. I feel that we would have passed it with a solid majority and would have overcome a filibuster. And I think that's referring to if there was a vote on the Senate floor. But can you walk me through what happened with the Safe Banking Act last week? There were about 8 people involved in the final conversations. Safe banking was in the NDA conversations until the very last minute, and it was taken out at the end, as I understand it, at the direction of the Senate Majority Leader. So, and then lastly, did Speaker Pelosi bring up any types of legislation that are going to be coming up in 2022 that this could be a good candidate to attach to again? We talked about a few things, but I think it's premature to discuss. But again, mainly it's just that Perlmutter's not backing down, and he's making Schumer own that. So I respect that. Well, on to this one as GOP lawmakers, so again, love to see this out of the GOP side, blast Biden and Harris over continued silence on cannabis and urge rescheduling. So just to highlight that it's Rep. Dave Joyce from Ohio and Don Young from Arkansas, both co-chairs of the Congressional Cannabis Caucus, first requested that the president take steps to reclassify cannabis under the Controlled Substances Act in July. They've yet to receive a response to that initial letter, a spokesperson for Joyce told Marijuana Moment. So the new letter discusses the significant research restrictions caused by cannabis's Schedule 1 classification, which continues to thwart the treatment of a wide range of patients, including those suffering from cancer, as well as veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder, to those living with multiple sclerosis and seizure disorder. So we love to see this pressure being continuously added on. So on to some state news as we look at the Office of Medical Cannabis Use from Florida. So this is for the last week of December 13th to the 17th. We see that AltMed and Curaleaf both opened a new store in Stewart, and so AltMed is owned by Verano, I believe. So we got Verano, Curaleaf, and then Sunnyside, owned by Cresco Labs, opening a new location in Sarasota. And so in terms of their qualified patient count, they increased it to 651,132 from last week, which was 648,186, for a total increase of 2,496 patients. And if we scroll down, we can see from the week of December 10th to the 16th, the amount of milligrams of THC sold, milligrams of CBD sold, and ounces of smokable flower sold across the board. So if you own any MSOs that have a footprint in Florida, this is one way you can check to see if they've maintained their market share or if they've lost any. And so it's worth adding that I did notice, I think at least AltMed Florida, which is owned by Verano, they've picked up their amount of milligrams sold in the last few weeks. And we could argue we could put them ahead of Curaleaf for number 2 now in Florida in terms of market share. So this is something that will always fluctuate week after week, and this is why running a business is not easy. The competition is very difficult, but that is one thing I noticed while Trulieve is still just dominating in this state of Florida. On to some other states though. So we've got some developments as New Mexico approves first recreational cannabis producer licenses, as they approved 3 recreational cannabis producer licenses, the first batch under the state's projected 350 million adult use program. And with the issuing of these 3 licenses, the adult use cannabis industry in New Mexico is officially up and running. Linda Trujillo, superintendent of the state's Regulation and Licensing Department, said in a news release, while sales are required to begin by April 1st, 2022, according to legislation passed in April. So it will be positive to see that pick up before a lot of the other states, while the MJ Biz Factbook projects that recreational cannabis sales will reach 125 million in the first year and 350 million annually by the 4th year of the program. So interesting to see that, but at least new states are getting the ball rolling. While New Jersey, slowly but surely, has opened up their applications officially for cultivation licenses, and about 500 were submitted in the first hour. So that goes to show that people want to jump on this opportunity. It's just unfortunate that the lawmakers are not making it easy for everyone to do so and get equal access. But New Jersey Cannabis Regulatory Commission on Wednesday began officially accepting applications from cannabis growers, manufacturers, and testing laboratory operators looking to break into the legal cannabis industry in New Jersey. However, applications from prospective cannabis dispensary owners won't open until the 15th. So unfortunately, it looks like anyone that wants to run a dispensary wouldn't be able to apply till the 15th, which again just really gives a big head start to any MSO currently already in New Jersey. So sadly, this delay just really hurts the small guy in the long run, I think. But just to add, nearly 500 individuals or entities filed applications in the first hours. The CRC website was open, and by 1 p.m., the form was generating about 155 users per hour, the Brown said. So at least that's positive that they are seeing lots of action and momentum and people want to jump on this. But if we can consider that dispensaries won't open until March 15th, we still don't have a date on when this could be launched. I've heard February, but again, that's just hearsay. Nothing that's fact. So at least we can update that the floodgates are open in New Jersey. So that's a slight positive. Well, New York's top cannabis regulator voices bullish timeline for adult use launch, saying she hopes the state can adhere to an 18-month timeline for March's enactment of adult use cannabis legislation to roll out the expected $1 billion program. I don't get why you'd want to wait that long. The sooner you can get this done, the sooner it benefits everybody. But regardless, that would seem to indicate hope that sales could start by late 2022 rather than 2023 as many now expect. So they claim it's a reasonable, although aggressive timeline, Cannabis Control Board Chair Tremaine Wright said at the Crane's New York Business Forum, but we hope to beat it. Yes, I hope you do too, because there's no reason to have to wait this long, but that is an update out of New York, and if they can get it rolling in 2022 better than 2023, we'll take that. But we'll believe it when we see it. On to Virginia. As Marijuana Moment reports, Virginia Legislative Joint Commission recommends speeding up cannabis sales launch by a year as well. So this is positive. So the Virginia Legislature Cannabis Oversight Panel on Thursday voted in favor of a recommendation to allow adult use cannabis sales to launch in January 2023, 1 year earlier than what was prescribed under the legalization law that passed this year, again, by Democrats. They were the ones that were going to delay until 2024. So keep that in mind, because Legislators Joint Commission on Cannabis Oversight voted 7-1 with one abstention to expedite retail sales and have the new Cannabis Control Authority regulate the program. Those initial sales would be facilitated through existing medical cannabis dispensaries as rules are implemented to license additional recreational retailers. However, it remains to be seen whether the full House of Delegates and Senate will ultimately adopt the recommendation when members reconvene next month under incoming Republican leadership in one chamber and the governor's office. So it's worth noting that this is still really just a recommendation and not necessarily what's going to happen. However, when the Republicans did take over, I believe in Virginia, I don't remember when the election was, but it was sometime in the summer and the fall, they did say that they're going to continue with speeding up this timeline. So while they've said that in the past, we have to wait and see whether they keep their word based on what they said, but it would make sense because, again, I think they see the benefit of speeding up the adult use legalization program, which takes away from the black market and the fact that while cannabis is decriminalized, there's no benefit of collecting taxes or providing jobs if you don't create an adult use market. So hopefully that they will stick to that, hopefully the incoming Republicans will stick to what they said previously a few months back, and I will try to update on this, if we do get new information from Virginia. But that is a positive, I'd say. While a few more from MJ Biz Daily, Arizona gets 1,500 plus applications for cannabis social equity licenses. So I'd say this is a positive, as Arizona cannabis regulators receive more than 1,500 applications from cannabis entrepreneurs, hoping to win one of the 26 highly coveted social equity permits that will be up for grabs via lottery early next year. So according to the Associated Press, the Arizona Department of Health will review all applications to make sure they're eligible as social equity candidates, but an exact date for the lottery has yet to be determined. And so I say this is a positive that a lot of people want to jump on this opportunity, but if you haven't even passed SAFE, how are these 26 even going to get started and compete with what's already existing in Arizona? That's the one thing for me I find extremely difficult. While they continue to push social equity, talk is cheap when you can see what their actions are really doing. While apparently awash in illegal cannabis farms, Oregon plans millions for relief, as the Oregon legislature has dedicated $25 million to combat the proliferation of illegal cannabis farms in Oregon. And so apparently a Democratic state senator from Southern Oregon said his region, awash in illegal cannabis farms that are protected by gunmen, is starting to look more like a failed state. So after hearing him and others testify this week, the Oregon legislature dedicated $25 million to help police, sheriff's offices, and community organizations pay for the ballooning costs of cracking down on the thousands of industrial-scale illegal cannabis farms. Residents says the assistance is welcome but not enough. Now, just to add, though, the illicit industry apparently in Oregon is generating billions of dollars in profits and is financed by well-heeled foreign criminal gangs and drug cartels, law enforcement officials says. Now, obviously, when we legalize cannabis, we assume that there's going to be enough funds for the police then to take care of this, but it seems as if this is not the case. But I would have to argue that this would not even be an issue if SAFE had been passed. And obviously, if SAFE was passed in the NDA, it would take time for it to be implemented. But had SAFE passed a long time ago, getting cash off the streets, there'd just be less incentive and less ability for organized crimes to generate this much money in order to become this dominant as well. And if you happen to be from Oregon or West Coast state where you're seeing some of this reality come to play, please let me know in the comments, because I'd love to hear your take on it and what's actually happening and how big of a detriment this actually is to the industry, and like what problems you think could actually be addressed to help fix this as well. Because at the same time, California cannabis business leaders warn state of collapsing industry. And so in a letter to California Governor Gavin Newsom and legislative leaders on Friday, a broad group of cannabis industry leaders warned that the state's licensed cannabis market is on the verge of collapse if drastic action is not taken. And I imagine if you're taxing the legal cannabis industry so high that they cannot even make profits off of their operations, then yes, that is what's going to cause the collapse. So it would be great if they could ease that up a little bit so they can compete with such a growing black market apparently in California, as an unwillingness to effectively legislate, implement, and oversee a functional regulated cannabis industry has brought us to our knees, reads the letter, which was signed by 27 business executives and longtime activists. The California cannabis system is a nationwide mockery, a public policy lesson in what not to do, the letter reads. And so without meaningful change, many, if not most, licensed cannabis companies will face a desperate choice: pay exorbitant taxes into a system designed for failure, or pay employees so they can feed their families. And I mean, hey, that seems like something that needs to be addressed. And so I hope that Gavin Newsom responds favorably. But in the letter and during the press conference on Friday, industry leaders requested that Newsom administration take effective steps, specific steps, to eliminate the state's MJ cultivation tax, which is slated to increase on January 1, 2022. So again, tax the hell out of this industry if you want to destroy it. It's not a very smart play. And that's also why COA has no chance. Because if you want to tax these companies 25% in the coming years, they're again just going to be crushed by the black market, which pays zero tax and is willing to take the risk, while implementing a 3-year suspension in the state's 15% cannabis excise tax, again, because more taxes does nobody good, especially while this industry is still emerging and while there's a black market problem, and expand the number of cannabis retailers in the state. So I'm going to be looking out for this, and hopefully we'll get some sort of an answer. We ask you to include these 3 items into the state budget, which will be initially released on January 10th, the letter reads. So obviously there's reason for them to cooperate with what the cannabis business leaders want, but this is interesting that we are getting to this point. So again, if you are from California or any of these states, please just add your 2 cents down here. It just would contribute us to figuring out what is actually going on in some of the western states, because hey, the US is a massive market and different markets act differently. So the best picture that we can get on what's actually going on, the better prepared we are as investors going forward. So on to some other news. This one from Todd Harrison shares a snippet from a Business Insider article: the 5 best cannabis stocks to bet on for 2022 according to Wall Street, according to Business Insider. So just going to share this one because I don't actually have the membership of Business Insider, so I can't read the full article, but he shared the snippet as cannabis sector stock performance. Weed maps? Really? Can't you just use Google and find any dispensary? I mean, we can in Canada. I don't know if it's the same for the US, but that's why I wouldn't be as bullish on weed maps, because Google takes care of all that. But they do have Green Thumb Industries, Trulieve, Air Wellness, and Cresco Labs, highlighting their cumulative stock price percent change from January 4th, 2021. And while their stock has gone down from this last year, and it's been unfortunately a terrible year for the cannabis industry, or at least for cannabis investors anticipating quick movement from the Dems and quick gains if the Dems were to have actually acted quickly. The one positive is to say that all of these cannabis companies, or at least Green Thumb, Trulieve, Air Wellness, and Cresco Labs, while their share price has gone down, they've increased their revenue, they've shown profitable quarters, and they've expanded their territory and footprint in legal states in the US. So I think that's what's the main takeaway, is that while prices are going down, these companies are only increasing in size and their fundamentals are getting better, so that presents the opportunity. While on top of that, Green Thumb published the statement of ownership where it appears passive investor Cowen Financial Products, so again, a large investment firm, has just purchased 12,534,461 voting shares of Green Thumb Industries for a ownership percentage of 5.64%. So it looks like an institution is increasing their ownership in Green Thumb, which is positive to see. And this is again adding to why some people are buying at these prices. And if institutional investors are taking advantage, then that is a sign that maybe they know something we don't, but this does definitely highlight that this is an opportunity when we have falling valuations, but increasing fundamentals over time. So just wanted to relay that. Lastly, a few other stories before we go. Epileptic seizure frequency fell by 86% in kids treated with whole plant medical cannabis. And so this is positive. We love seeing more data, but it's just frustrating that we can only really accelerate this once we deschedule the plant. So they add further therapeutic benefits of whole plant products, now worth exploring, says researchers. It's been worth exploring for decades, but epileptic seizure frequency fell by an average of 86% among 10 children treated with whole plant medical cannabis, reveals a case series published in the open access journal BMG Pediatrics Open. None of the children had responded to other treatments, including the only CBD product licensed for their condition. And so these findings prompt the researchers to call for further exploration of the potential therapeutic benefits of whole plant medicinal cannabis products. And then get this, just this line is so frustrating. Adding substantial anecdotal evidence on the value of medicinal cannabis for treating childhood epilepsies has been accumulating since the 1800s, says the researchers. And that's a fact. But there's not been much recent scientific evidence on the effectiveness of whole plant cannabis extracts, obviously because it's still a Schedule 1 substance. And the worst part is I've relayed this in past videos, but top federal scientists admit that they don't even try to study cannabis because of the classification, instead of taking the steps to get it declassified or descheduled so that they can find out, for the benefit of all Americans and people around the world, the real therapeutic benefits of the most versatile medicine we have on the planet. So it's inexcusable, but when we highlight the fact that the frequency fell by an average of 86% among 10 children and that none of the children responded to other treatments, like, this calls for descheduling, and we're almost there, there. I hope we get it sooner than later, but rant over as we just have another study. So I want to relay this as more data is good that smoking CBD-rich cannabis has no significant impact on driving ability, study finds. Now this would be CBD-rich, not THC-rich. So obviously CBD is not psychoactive. It does not get you stoned, but there are still benefits from taking CBD for the human body versus THC, which is more for the medicinal aspect. So this is positive though, because there's more data going to show that we cannot treat drinking and driving the same as smoking and driving, just because they are different. And so it's worth looking at the nuances that make them different so we can come to the right conclusion. So a new study found not significant impact on driving ability after smoking CBD-rich cannabis and no effects on vital signs, even as all study participants exceeded the legal limit for THC in their blood. So I'm glad that they've looked into this because this is worth figuring out like the details of. But for the pilot study conducted in Switzerland, 33 participants were each given a joint containing 500 milligrams of tobacco and either 500 milligrams of CBD-rich cannabis, 16.6% total CBD, 0.9% THC, or a 500 milligram of a placebo containing a product called Naster Kemp, a nicotine-free and cannabinoid-free herbal mixture with a hemp aroma. Researchers then use multiple common DUI tests. So as the Swiss market for CBD products has exploded in recent years, the authors wish to investigate the efficacy of CBD-rich tobacco smoking cessation products and their impact on driving safety. And so according to 3 researchers from the Institute of Forensic Medicine at the University of Bern, the purpose of the current study was to inform recommendations for warnings on tobacco substitute products containing CBD-rich cannabis and to provide information for drivers regarding the possible risks of consuming CBD-rich cannabis. And to the best of our knowledge, the current study is one of the first to investigate the potential impact of smoking CBD-rich cannabis for road safety, they said, and there's no significant impact on driving ability was found after smoking CBD-rich cannabis. So I think that is very positive. So obviously we do need to figure out, the differences and try and best address them. Another positive victory for the plant and its supporters, and unfortunately a big L and another hard new truth for those prohibitionists that are very sad to see us prove them wrong. And on to this one from the Ontario Cannabis Store, a quarterly review of Canadian cannabis sales from July 1st to September 30th, 2021. And these are adult use sales, but the main thing I just want to highlight and show you is the big juice of it, because for the first time ever, Ontario recreational cannabis market share has outpaced the illegal market. So apparently in Q2 of 2021, 54.2% of Canada's legal sales, or Canada's total sales, came from the legal market versus 45.8% from the illegal market. So I consider this a big victory, but just goes to show if you're given the choice to buy from the government-owned store or a retail store near you, you are always going to choose the retail store, because this isn't even funny anymore comparison-wise. 56.3 million grams sold in total. 53.7 million came from the retail stores. 2.7 million from the government. So it just goes to show no one wants to buy cannabis from the government, but when you open more stores, you allow for more sales to come in. As of now, we have 1,115 stores open across Canada, which is a big victory. And obviously, most of them are coming from Ontario because that's where most of our population is, and that's where we've needed stores the most. So one thing I did just want to highlight, though, sales data. So what does the sales data breakdown look like for Canada so far? So after being 2.5 years in or 3 years in, we'd say dried flower still has 52% of the market sales. Vapes now has 15%, pre-rolled 19%, edibles 5%, concentrates 3%, oils 2%, and beverages only making up a measly 2% of sales, sadly due to the very strict regulations that we have in Canada. So I've no doubt if those were loosened, then any companies that bet big on the beverages would see more success, and if it was easier for people to buy more of them at once, it would allow for that as well. But sadly, until that gets fixed, it's going to lead to a very small number of sales, while capsules have 1%, topicals 1%, and seeds 1%. So at the end of the day, though, it highlights that years in, dried flower is king. Vapes do well, and pre-rolled and edibles are making their way up in the market. But as well, we can only allow 5 to 10 milligrams. So if we can increase that limit, I imagine edibles will get a big kickstart. And then so lastly, just wanted to share another story of the reality, sadly, that is going on, because as long as problems are not solved and solutions do not come out at the federal level, then we're going to continue to see this on the ground as dispensary robbery in LA South LA leaves 1 killed and a family grieving. So just wanted to share a bit of the story as the family is grieving over the senseless death of their loved one, Dominique Ware, who was shot and killed at a dispensary in South Los Angeles. But when this hit me, it tore me up to know what happened to my son, said Letitia Ware, Dominique Ware's mother. And so Ware's family said 33-year-old Ware was working as a security guard at the time of the robbery and shooting, and they said he was also much more than that. And so he wasn't just a security guard, as Ware's sister Barbara Goodwin said. A lot of the captions out there say security guard murdered in robbery. That's not who he was. He was a hero. He was an amazing person, and he wanted everybody to know that. And I do hope that he did help save some of the lives, and maybe sacrificed his life to ensure the safety for the other dispensary workers. And that is a hero in my definition. So good news is that 3 people in connection with this incident have been arrested. although one is still on the loose. An LAPD homicide investigation remains ongoing. And a GoFundMe page has been set up to help Ware's family with funeral costs if you wanted to access it and help out. But all links will be down there below. But I really wanted to end off with this just to highlight that if any of the problems have not been solved by incremental steps, that means the problems will exist. And so as much as we see a lot of talk from congressional members saying that, hey, this is going to be a 2022 priority, obviously it's wise for us to say, well, we'll believe it when we see it. But if the problems continue to go, there's got to be a solution at some point. So that's why I remain optimistic that something will get done. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments. And that is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories as well? You can let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But if you do live in a U.S. state, any of the ones mentioned, please offer your 2 cents just so that we can try to get as close to the truth as possible as what's happening. So as investors, it can help us make better decisions over time. But if you enjoyed this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Wednesday for a midweek update. Have a great weekend, everybody.